Hi guys, welcome to a new video. In this video I've showed you how you can make these majestic looking jellyfish, and you can use these for literally anything that you like. You can use them as a keychain, room decor, car decor, bag accessory. The possibilities are endless. So before we get started, this video is a little bit longer than I intended to be, but that is because I've tried to go very slowly and in details so that I can make this pattern as beginner friendly as possible. So if you're a beginner, fear not. You'll be able to follow along very easily. I've taken inspiration from the viral jellyfish on Pinterest. However, this is my pattern, so please do not resell or redistribute this pattern and only use it for personal use. My cat has decided to join us. I've worked really hard both on the pattern and the video, so I would appreciate if you guys could give me some love by commenting, liking, and subscribing so you don't miss any future content. And also, please, if you make this, give me credit. These are my socials. I saw this post the other day that was like, when you click on a beginner friendly tutorial and they go really slowly, is that me? Like, have I gone too slow? Please, I really would love some criticism and some feedback so that I can improve my videos. So really, if you guys have anything to say, just comment it down below. I love reading your comments. Let's get on to the video. To make the jellyfish, you're gonna need a hook. I'm using a 2.5mm hook, and then you're gonna need some yarn that corresponds with the size of the hook that you're using. Of course, you can use any hook size that you'd like, but if you want to keep these jellyfish small so that you can use them for bag accessory or like a keychain and stuff, I don't recommend going over a 3mm hook. However, if you're intending to use these as like room decor, or if you guys have seen those hanging jellyfish, then you can obviously use a bigger gauge. And this pattern is very adjustable, and I'll teach you in the video how to add more increases to make your jellyfish bigger if that's what you'd like. My colors, I use 3 main colors for each of the jellyfish, so I'm going for a purple theme right now, but I also have some blue on hand in case I want to add it to the strands that hang from the jellyfish. And you're gonna need some beads. I think that, in my opinion, this is what makes these jellyfish very beautiful and unique looking. I really like the addition of beads to the crochet, so I just have some little beads here that match the color of the yarn that I'm using. I also have some pearls that I like to crochet in with a white yarn and add them to the strands as well. And then other than those, you're gonna need a pair of scissors, a stitch marker, darning needle, and then a normal needle to thread the beads through, and then obviously some thread. And then lastly, you're gonna need some fiber fill or stuffing to put in the inside of the jellyfish. I mentioned this pattern is adjustable and very customizable. That means that you can use any color gradient that you'd like and change the colors that I've used here. Like for example, I start with white, but you can start with any other color that you'd like. Also, feel free to use the color palettes that I've used. I love to see you guys take inspiration from the projects that I make. But we're gonna start by making a magic circle. I have an in-depth tutorial on how to make a magic circle, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But basically, wrap your yarn around your fingers, go under that first strand, take that second strand, twist it, chain 1, and this is a magic circle. If you don't know how to make this, be sure to check out my beginner's tutorial on how to make a magic circle. And now we're going to put 6 single crochets into our magic circle. So put your hook back into that circle. Make sure you're going under these 2 strands of yarn. Grab your yarn, pull it through, and make a single crochet. So we just did 1. We want to do 5 more, so a total of 6. So again, go into that circle. Make sure you're going under these 2 strands. Grab your yarn, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, and that's another one. After you make your 6 single crochets, take this yarn, that's the tail of the magic circle, and then when you pull on it, it'll close the circle, and put your stitch marker on that last stitch of the row so that you don't lose count of your rows. And this is our first row done, so I'm actually going to close this stitch marker so that it doesn't fall out. So now for the next row, we're going to be putting increases into all these stitches, and an increase is when you put 2 stitches into the same stitch. So we're going to be putting 2 single crochets in each of these stitches. So go ahead and find your next stitch, The first stitch of the magic circle is always going to be quite tight, but that's okay. You have to just put your hook through it. Just for clarification, you see this little bump right here? That's from the chain that we did. We don't want to go into this, but instead we want to go into this V looking stitch right here. So insert your hook into that stitch. It's okay if it's tight. And then grab your yarn, make a single crochet, and then go back into that same stitch where we just made a single crochet and make another single crochet. So that's an increase, and we're gonna repeat doing this all around for this round. So again, find your next stitch, go into your next stitch, make a single crochet, and then go back into that same stitch and make another single crochet. So just to show you guys what I mean by go back into that same stitch, I just did this stitch right here, right? And you guys can see like this little hole, so that's where I'm putting my hook into. I've reached my stitch markers, so I'm gonna take it out. I'm gonna do the 2 increases into that last stitch. And then on this last stitch, I just like to push my stitches down a little bit because the stitch marker creates a little bit of a gap. So I just like to push down on my stitches so that they fill that gap. And then put your stitch marker back into that last stitch. For row 3, we're going to be repeating an alternating pattern, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. So find your next stitch, go into your next stitch and make just a single crochet, and then in the next stitch we're gonna do an increase, which is 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So go into your next stitch, make a single crochet, and then back into that same stitch and make another single crochet. So the alternating pattern here that we do is we do single crochet increase, single crochet increase, single crochet increase all the way around, and your row is always going to end on an increase. So again, just to show you, we just did an increase, right? So in the next stitch, go find your stitch, make a single crochet, and then find your next stitch and then make an increase, which is just 2 single crochets. Repeat doing this all around until you meet your stitch marker, and as I mentioned, on the stitch marker it's going to end in an increase, and your total stitch count for this row is going to be 18 stitches, so you can always go back and count it to see if you've made a mistake or not. I just did my last stitch, which ended on an increase, so I'm gonna put my stitch marker back on my last stitch. And then now to show you, it's a little bit difficult to see with white yarn, but I guess you can kind of see it. So in the stitches where you put an increase, you can see that there's like a bundle of 2, and then on the stitches that there's just 1 stitch, there's just 1. So this is something that you're gonna have to get used to be able to like tell it apart. But if you look at your work and if you've made a mistake and your stitch count is off or you didn't end on an increase, you can always just go back and look at your row, so you don't have to unravel everything. You can go back and look at your row to see if you've made a mistake. So if you look, you can see that when there's 2 stitches, that's an increase. When there's 1 stitch, that was just your 1 single crochet. Another common mistake I see that crocheters make is that they crochet inside out. So basically you want this side of your work to be on the outside, so the side where the tail from the magic circle is hanging off and the stitches are not as defined. Like if you look here, you can very clearly tell the stitches apart, but when you look on this side, everything kind of just blends together. This is the side that should be on the inside. This is the wrong side of your project, so always make sure that the good side is facing you. Coming up on row 4, we're going to be doing the alternating pattern again, but this time it's a little bit different. So last row we did 1 single crochet and then 1 increase. So this row we're actually going to do 2 single crochets in 2 separate stitches and then an increase. Go ahead and find your next stitch and then make just a single crochet, and then find your next stitch and then make another single crochet, and then on that third stitch we're gonna make an increase. So just as a reminder, an increase is 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So I just made one, go back into that same stitch and then make your increase. So the alternating pattern that we will be repeating for this row is single crochet, increase. So again, just to show you, next stitch, single crochet, next stitch, single crochet, and then the next stitch and increase. Your total stitch count for this row should be 24, and again, as I've mentioned, your row is gonna end in an increase. I'm on the last stitch of the row, so I'm gonna take out my stitch marker and then I'm gonna make a single crochet. We have to do an increase, but I'm gonna set this aside for just a second. So basically in these 2 jellyfish, the difference is that I've done more white on this one, and this one I switched colors right after row 4, so basically where we are right now. But for this one I did white for row 5 as well and then switched colors. Of course, as I've mentioned, you can switch colors whenever you want, but I like it better when more of the colors are visible, because if you guys can see here, only 1 row of the dark pink is visible, but here you can see 2 rows of the blue. How to switch colors: you actually do it on the last stitch of the previous row. So right now we have to make the last stitch of this row that we're in, right? So the row ends in an increase. We just made 1 single crochet, so we want to make another one to make the increase. So put your hook back into that same stitch, pull up a loop, but don't yarn over with your white yarn. Instead, I'm gonna grab my second color and I'm gonna leave like a considerable amount of tail so that I have like a little bit of room to work with. Then pull the yarn through, and this is how we finish off the last stitch of our row 4. Stitch marker back on that last stitch where we just finished off with the purple, and then that's the end of our row 4, and we're gonna start on row 5. So for row 5, I have these 2 tails that are from the yarns. This one is from the purple yarn, and then this one is from the white one that we haven't cut off yet. So I like to crochet over these for a couple of rounds just to like make it extra secure. So for this round, again, we're doing an alternating pattern of 3 stitches and then an increase. So find your next stitch and then put these 2 tails on top of your hook so that you crochet over them. Look how I'm holding them, look at my fingers. So I'm just holding it down like this, and then grab your yarn and yarn over, finish the stitch. So if you look here, you kind of crocheted over these. This is not a necessary step, you can just rebit it as you normally would, but this does make your life a lot easier. So again, this was 1 single crochet, so going into that next stitch, again making sure these 2 are on my hook, grabbing my yarn, making another stitch, that's 2, and then we're doing 1 more single crochet. So into the next stitch, put these 2 over your hook, yarn over, and then that's 3 stitches. So right now I'm comfortable with the amount of times I've crocheted over these, so I'm just gonna let go of them and cut them off in a little bit. But we did 3 single crochets, so now it's time to do an increase in the next stitch. So again, go into the stitch, make a single crochet, go back, make another single crochet. And this is the pattern that we're going to be repeating for this row. I'm not going to film it anymore, and I'll meet you back once my row is done. This is the end of my row. The total stitch count for this row is 30 stitches, and at this point I am done with my increases. So I'm just going to be doing single crochets from now on all around. But if you do want to make your jellyfish a bit bigger, you can continue doing that alternating pattern that we've been doing. So we started with 1 and then increase, and then 2 increase, 3 increase, and now if you want to continue making this bigger and bigger, you do 4 single crochets and increase, and if you want to make it even bigger, you do 5 increase, 6 increase, so on and so forth. But I am happy with doing just 3 rows of increases. So from now on, we're just going to be doing single crochets into all these rows, and I'm not gonna be filming all of it, but basically where I'm gonna be doing my color change is at the end of this row that I'm starting. So we're gonna be starting row 6 right now. So I'm gonna be doing single crochets into all these stitches with the same color that I'm doing right now, with the same light purple. But then when I reach this last stitch, I'm gonna finish it off darker purple. So we're gonna be doing the color change exactly like how we did. And again, feel free to adjust the pattern as you wish. If you want to use one color more or one color less, you're obviously free to do that, but just follow the pattern on the screen. It's just single crochets all around. You don't need to be doing any counting, and the total number of stitches are just going to be 30 stitches. This is the end of my row 8, and I'm just going to keep using the same color. At the bottom of the jellyfish, it doesn't really matter what color it is. For this row, we're again only doing single crochets, but we're going to do them a little bit differently. So what we're going to do is that we're going to only be going into the back loops, leaving the front loops open. So what I mean by that is, when you look at a stitch right here, you see that it looks like a V, right? There's a loop here and then another loop here. When you hold your work, you see that one of the loops is facing you and then one of them is away from you. So the one that is away from you is called the back loop, and we're going to be only doing single crochets in the back loop for this round. So put your hook right down the middle of your stitch and then just pick up that back loop and then make a normal single crochet. So again, just to show you, put your hook right in the middle of your stitch, grab your back loop, pull up a yarn, make a single crochet. This is all we're doing this round. No increases, no decreases. We're gonna keep the 30 stitches stitch count, but we're just crocheting into the back loops. This is my last stitch. I'm gonna take out my stitch marker and then gonna pick up that back loop, make a single crochet, and then mark that last stitch again. So when you look at your work right now, you can see that there's kind of like this line going across your entire work, and that is where we're going to be crocheting these little ruffles. So basically that's why we did that, and now we're going to get started on doing the decreases. For doing the decreases, we're going to be again following that alternate pattern, but instead of an increase, we're going to be doing a decrease. Find your next stitch. It might be a little bit difficult because there's like a lot going on here, but your next stitch should be the one right here. So make a single crochet, and then in the next one make a single crochet, and then in the next one again make a single crochet. So we just did 3 single crochets, and now we're going to do a decrease, and I like to do an invisible decrease. So how you do that is, again, you know how I told you there's a back loop and a front loop? So for the decrease, we're going to pick up the front loop instead. So I just picked up the front loop of my next stitch, and then without doing anything, I'm gonna go ahead and pick up the front loop of the stitch next to it as well. And now I have 3 loops on my hook, right? So I'm gonna yarn over and pull through the first 2, and then yarn over and pull through the second 2. That is how you do a decrease. So what we did here was 3 single crochets a decrease, and now this is the pattern that we're gonna be following. So if you look here, this is not your next stitch, this is. I know that this can be a little bit confusing, but you can see that this is being pulled on, and you know that this was the stitch where you just did a decrease into. So this right here is your next stitch. Keep doing this 3 and then decrease, 3 and then decrease. You're gonna end on a decrease, and then for the row after that, I'm gonna do it off camera. We're gonna be doing 1 single crochet decrease. So instead of like going down like the stacking method where we did with increases, I'm just gonna skip doing the 2 single crochets decrease because I don't want there to be many rows for the bottom. So yeah, we're gonna transition from 3 single crochets decrease to 1 single crochet, 1 decrease. I'm on the last decrease of this round, so I'm gonna just take out my stitch marker right now, and then find the front loop of my next stitch and then the front loop of the one after it. The second stitch is where the stitch marker was in, so this is like the very last stitch of this row, and then just make a normal decrease, and then put the stitch marker back onto that last stitch. Finish doing that row of 1 single crochet, 1 decrease. We're gonna start stuffing our jellyfish, and you can stuff it to the firmness that you'd like, but I don't recommend overstuffing it, because then you can kind of see on this one I made this mistake where I kind of overstuffed it just a little bit, so the bottom is like kind of poking out, and I'm not a big fan of that look. So just stuff it to the point where the top like keeps its dome shape but the bottom doesn't poke out. I've put some stuffing in, and you can go ahead and stuff it even more after doing this round, but I'm gonna really quickly just do my last rows of decreases. So for this row, all we're gonna do is we're gonna make decreases all along, so we're not doing any more single crochets. So just pick up the 2 front loops of your next 2 stitches, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then go directly into the front loops of the next 2 stitches. So to fasten off, I'm gonna go into the next stitch and then grab my yarn. Now I have 2 loops onto my hook. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that second loop onto that first one, and this is how we fasten off. This is called a slip stitch, and then I'm gonna chain 1 and then cut my yarn, leaving a little bit of tail so that we can close that gap. Pull the yarn out with your hook, and then now we have this little hole. So this is the time where if you want to add more stuffing or take out some stuffing, you can go ahead and do that. The hole is a little bit tiny, so I like to push in the stuff in the back of my hook. Grab your darning needle and then feed this tail through the whole end of the needle. We're gonna go into these stitches in kind of like a wave, like a weaving pattern, I think that's what it's called. I'll make sure to link an in-depth tutorial on how to like actually do this, but we're just going into the stitches and then coming out of them like this. And now I'm gonna pull on this tail, and you can see that the hole closes up, right? This is the hole where it closed up, so I'm just gonna go over it a couple times and kind of like stitch over it a little bit just to make sure that no stuffing falls out of it. And then the beauty of this pattern is, since we're gonna have a bunch of stuff just hanging off from the jellyfish anyways, you don't need to cut this tail, so I'm just gonna leave it here as is, and then I'm gonna adjust the size later on based on the length I make the little add-on accessories. For the ruffles, I'm gonna switch back to white, and I'm gonna start by making a slip knot. Wrap my yarn around my finger like this, and then go under that, and then pull this up. This tutorial is also included in my magic circle tutorial if you want to go check that out, but we have a slip knot right now. So I'm gonna take this off the hook and then grab my jellyfish. So as I mentioned, this line right here where we made is where we're gonna crochet in the ruffles. So start off by going into this stitch. This is the very last stitch of the row, and these are like the front loops of the stitches, right? So we're going into these front loops. Then grab this loop that you made with the slip knot, put it on your hook, and then pull the loop through, chain 1, and this kind of counts as your first stitch. So now we're gonna be making this stitch called scalloped stitch, which is like basically like making like little scalloped or little ruffled edges. We're gonna be doing double crochets. Wrap your yarn around your hook, so we have like a little loop like this here. My first stitch would be this loop right here, which is where we first started doing the back loop crochets. So put your hook into that, grab your yarn. Now you have 3 loops onto your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and this is a double crochet. So we're gonna be doing 5 double crochets into the same stitch. So we just did 1. So wrap your yarn again in your hook, go back into that same stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That's 2 double crochets. So now into our next stitch, our next front loop, we're gonna be doing just a slip stitch. So insert your hook, pull up a loop, pull the second loop into the first loop. Now again, we're gonna be repeating this. So in the next stitch, again, we're gonna be putting 5 double crochets. And once you're done, you go into the next stitch and then you just do a slip stitch. After you make your last scallop, go back into that same stitch and make a slip stitch, and then chain 1, then go ahead and cut your yarn. And at the end of this, we can pull any of these loose ends into the body, so don't worry too much about them. This is the part where like you can be as free as you want. You can add as many or as little as you'd like. To start off, I'm gonna make some like random chains of varying lengths. So just start with a slip knot, then just start chaining and stop whenever it feels right to you. Okay, I like this length, so now I'm gonna cut my yarn. Don't finish off this last stitch because it's just gonna make it so much easier to attach it, because then you can kind of just like crochet it on. You don't have to sew it. So just take your hook out of the loop, make sure that you don't let go of that loop, and just set this aside. I'm gonna repeat making this in white and the dark purple as well. Right now I'm gonna do the braid. Grab all my 3 colors, cut like about 30 centimeters, your strands, and turn them into something like a slip knot, because we want like a loop here right at the top. I like to tape this down so that I can braid it easily. Literally just start braiding the strands as you would normally like braid anything like your hair. We're gonna like tie the end of the braid, so I'm showing you how I tie it. So I hold on to like the end of my braid, and I take the rest of the tail and then I put it over the braid, and then I go inside this loop and grab the rest of them, and then make sure that I bring the knot all the way down to the end of my braid and then secure it, and then go ahead and cut any excess yarn that you have. But don't throw these away because we're gonna also hang these from the jellyfish. I'm gonna get started on the little pearl like braid kind of. So I have this strand of yarn. I think it's about 30 centimeters, and then I have it folded in half. And for this part, if you have a clipboard, it's just gonna make your life so much easier. So again, we're gonna start by making a knot at the very top right here. Because I wrap it around my finger, and then I pull the loop through this loop, and you're just kind of like basically tying a knot, so then you have like a little loop here. I've got my pearls set there ready. Take your needle and go through the little bumpy part on the knot. Like you see this bump right here, that's what I'm talking about. So just put your needle through there, put this in the clipboard. So we're essentially gonna do a braid, but one of the strands is the thread. So just start on the braid, like braid a couple rows normally. Go ahead and put a pearl into your needle and then onto the thread. Put the needle through the braid that we just made. Putting my needle through the braid that we just made and then taking it out of there, and this kind of secures the pearl into place. But then I just go into the hole of the pearl one more time, and then pull up the thread until I have like this little loop, and then I put my needle back through this loop, and then I make sure that it's all nice and secure. You can continue making the braid again and just keep doing this. So make a couple braids, like I think I do 3 or 4, and then I grab another pearl. You could also just do a normal white braid and then sew on the beads afterwards, but I find this easier, so I'm gonna do this with 5 more pearls and then I'll be back. To fasten it off, I'm just gonna tie a knot with these 2 strands that I have here. Put my needle and my thread through just one of these like braid stitches again, and the needle back into that loop to make like a knot, and then you can cut your thread, and then you can cut these strands as well. For these curls and the length that I want, I found that it's best to chain 30. So start with a slip knot and then chain 30, starting from the second chain off your hook. So this will be the first chain, this right here is the second chain, into that back bump that is on the second chain from the hook, and then make a single crochet, and then go back into that same stitch, make another single crochet, but this time don't complete it, and then grab your second color like this, put it on your hook, and complete your last single crochet with that color. Basically doing an increase in all these stitches, or 2 single crochets in all these stitches. So now looking at my next stitch is right here, go into it, make a single crochet, back into that same stitch, make another single crochet. The last stitch, just make a chain and then cut your yarn and then pull it tight. Where we changed color, I'm just gonna tie these 2 ends together, and then if your curl is not as curly as you'd like it to be, you can just like twist it and then it will just naturally take on the shape. And now for the star of the show, no pun intended, we're gonna be making this little strand that is just the beads. This is the final layout that I settled on, and I have my long thread connected to my needle. So now I'm gonna start putting all these beads onto my thread one by one. So I'm gonna pick out my first bead and then put it onto my needle and onto the thread. Make sure to leave some tail at the end right here so that your bead doesn't come out. And now we're basically gonna secure this bead. So I'm gonna put my needle back through that hole of the bead and then take it out. It's kind of difficult to show, but basically what I just did was I just put my needle through the bead again, and now we have this loop here. So now I'm gonna grab my needle, put it under that loop, and then take it out from the inside of the loop, making a knot. This is how you can secure on your first bead. Repeat this process one more time. So you go back inside of the bead, and then you leave like a little loop here, and then you put your needle through the loop again, and then you tie it. Your first bead is pretty much secure, so you can just go ahead and thread in all your other beads as well. This is what my final bead chain looks like, and don't take it off your thread. You're just gonna set this aside because we're gonna just use this to sew it onto the body of the jellyfish. Once you finish making all of your add-ons, you can start attaching them to the body of the jellyfish that you made. I like to start with my little spirals, and I put them in like a little triangle, and then from there I can determine the place of everything else. So when we fastened off our work, we have these 2 tails here. So what I just do is I put these 2 into one of the stitches of the body, and then I just tie a knot. Insert my hook into any random stitch here, and then I'm gonna grab one tail end of the spiral and then pull it through. So now I'm gonna use these 2 tails to tie a knot, and go ahead and tie another one so it's nice and extra secure. These hanging tails, we can just insert our hook into any random point of the body, grab these 2 tails and pull them on the inside of your jellyfish. Spirals are attached. I kind of have a general understanding of where I want to put everything else. So now I'm gonna go ahead and take my little bead chain that I've made, and it's still attached to the thread in between these 2 curls, and then I want to do it a little bit more on the inside. I attached these 2 curls or spirals on like one of the outer rows, but this one I'm going more for like the inner rows. So just insert your needle into any random stitch and then pull it all the way until you have your first bead touching the body. We're gonna go into any random stitch that is close to where your needle came out of, and then we're gonna pull, but not all the way. We're gonna leave a little loop. You want this little loop right here. So go ahead and put your needle back into that loop and then pull it all the way so that there is no extra thread hanging from your very first bead over there. And then now we're gonna repeat doing this step a couple times so that our little bead chain is nice and secure. Pull on it so that you make sure that it's super tight. And then after you've done that a while, I put my needle back into the body of the jellyfish, and I like to come out of an opposite end, and then you can go ahead and cut this excess thread. With our chains, do you remember I told you to not fasten it off? That's because now we can just put that very last chain onto our hook, and then now put your hook into any random stitch that you like. Grab this tail and put it onto your hook, and then kind of twist your hook so that you don't let go of it, and then pull it through the body and through that last chain that you didn't finish off. And this is kind of like slip stitching the chain onto the body of the jellyfish. So now that I've done that, I'm gonna go ahead and pull in this tail. Little pearl strand and the braid, since they have a loop at the top, we put them in similarly. Go into any random stitch, then put this loop onto your hook and then pull the loop through. You're gonna use this opening to feed your little chain into it. So I just put my chain onto my hook and then I pull it in here, and this might be a little bit difficult since you have pearls, so you can't pull it as smoothly, but the pearls should pass through the little hole because it's big enough. And then once you're done doing that, just pull on it and then it's nice and secure. And this is exactly how you would attach the little braid. At this point you can introduce other colors to your palette as well, but I don't really think that I'm going to be doing that today. So for my final touches, I'm gonna take some strands of yarn and then fold it in half so that it's the length that you want it to be, but leave like just the tiniest bit at the top. But this is how I just add plain strands to the jellyfish. Insert your hook into any random stitch, have this loop, put it on your hook, and then pull it through, but not all the way, and now pull these tails into that loop you just made. So we're kind of just like tying it on there, and then you can go ahead and trim it shorter if you'd like. But yeah, I'm gonna be doing that a bunch of times with my colors until I'm just happy with the way that this looks, and then we're gonna be adding the finishing touches. For the finishing touches, I like to use my darkest color of yarn and make like little lines here at the top. It just adds character to the jellyfish. So I'm just gonna take my dark yarn and then I'm gonna have a strand. It doesn't need to be that long, and then cut it. Then for this step, you need a darning needle. So put your yarn into your needle, and now we're gonna be inserting our needle right down that center. This is the place where we made the magic ring, so right down the center. And then I'm gonna come out of random stitches. If you guys look here, they're not even, like this one is short, this one's longer, this one's short again. So insert your hook right down the center there and come out of a random stitch, and then don't pull this all the way because then it's gonna come undone. So I like to hold this down with my thumb, and then once you come out of that stitch, go back into that same hole and then come out of that same hole again and make a line like this. So now I like to insert my hook back into that stitch and then come out of the middle part right here, and then just repeat what we did. So again, I'm going to go into a random stitch. This time I'm going to go a little bit longer, and then put my needle in that stitch, come out of the top right there, and then pull it. You're just gonna repeat this until you've done it all the way around. To finish off, I'm gonna insert my hook back into that middle part again and then push it all the way so that it's at the bottom here, and then pull it. You can leave this strand or you can cut it. I'm gonna cut it because I'm already happy with the way that my little tentacles look. So I'm just gonna cut this. And then for this part, you can just push it in with the back of your needle, or you can also use your hook to insert your hook into like any of these stitches and pull it out like that. To make this little hanging part, we're gonna take our white yarn and then make a slip knot, and then we're gonna chain 6 and then chain 1 more, cut your yarn leaving a tail, and then pull this through. Put your hook and a stitch between the first row, which is the magic circle, and then the second row. Push it out from the opposite end. Take the chain that you just made, put it on your hook, or put one of the tails on your hook, and then pull it, but not all the way so that it doesn't come undone. And now we're gonna tie a knot. Basically, I'm just gonna tie a knot until the 2 ends of the chain meet, and then I'm gonna go ahead and tie another knot and make it extra secure. And now I'm gonna grab my needle and then bring them to the bottom here. And now you can use this part to either make a chain if you want to hang your jellyfish, or you can just use a strand of yarn and hang it. One last thing, and this part is optional, so if you have an eyeshadow that matches the color palette that you use, you can go ahead and put some eyeshadow around your colors so that you can make it seem as if they're blending, because that with yarn the color changes suddenly and some people don't like that. So this is just a recommendation. You can just put some eyeshadow around it, and this will not rub off, especially because it's not something that you will be touching a lot. Obviously, if you touch it, then the color will fade a little bit over time, but if you just leave it as is, the eyeshadow will stay on. So as you can see here, this kind of like adds like a transitional color between my white and my light purple. This is it for today's video. If you guys make these, please make sure to give me credit. These are my socials once again. If you guys have anything to say, just comment it down below. I love reading your comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!